If you've ever found yourself struggling to do the right thing, especially in those days when you're more tired, more exhausted, when you don't feel like it, but you know you should do it, then this video is for you. First of all, to start, I want to share with you the story of a man that was able to overcome this and to put into practice what we're going to talk about today, but in the most extreme circumstances. So he wasn't struggling with, starting a business, getting a promotion, becoming better fitness-wise. None of these trivial problems when compared to what he was facing. This was none other than Viktor Frankl, and his problem, his struggle, was that he was in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. Now, if you've read his book, Man's Search for Meaning, well, first of all, if you haven't, I definitely recommend that you do, because it's one of the best books that I've ever read. But inside it, we find that in his time there, essentially, he lost everyone that he cared for. His identity was stripped from him, his job, everything that he had, he knew, and he cared for was essentially disappeared from one day to the next. Despite this, as Viktor tells us in his book, initially, obviously, he was upset, he was sad, he was all the emotions you would feel that you would imagine someone feeling if this were to happen. But the most surprising thing is that after a certain point, Viktor had this realization. In the middle of all of this, one of the biggest tragedies anyone could face or has ever faced in the history of humanity, Viktor writes in his book, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Now, when I wrote this quote many years ago, it really changed the perspective I had of things. Before that, this was really in the beginning when I started diving more into self-development, self-improvement, all this stuff. It really changed how I was viewing everything. Because before that, I was always very prey to my emotions, to my feelings, to essentially what my mind was telling me. But in this quote, it's so well put, I don't think anyone has ever written it better. You really understand that no matter how bad things are or how chaotic or how overwhelming, you always have the space between what is happening and what you choose to do. Obviously, sometimes that space is going to be smaller, sometimes it's going to be more subtle, you're not going to notice that space, and sometimes you're going to notice and you're going to do the wrong thing anyways. But just the awareness that it is there, that you are in control of doing the best you can, regardless of how bad the situation is, changes everything. Your problems and my problems and pretty much everyone's problems are not as serious as his problems were. We have much more freedom to choose what we do. The consequences are not as high. We're not in such a horrible situation, environment surrounded by horrible people. None of that. But regardless, we still have problems. We still have challenges. We still have goals we want to achieve. And all of them require us to act in the best way we can, to really take this space between the stimulus and response and do the best we can with it. The biggest problem people tend to face is that there are usually two voices inside of you. When this space appears for you to take an action, usually there's going to be a lot of paths that you can take. There's a broad range of decisions you can take, from the worst to the best. Now, the problem here is that, as I was saying, usually we have two voices kind of quote-unquote talking to us. You have the good side, the one that is telling you, go, get up, go to the gym, go and work, go, don't eat this food, eat the correct one. The one that tells you what you should actually do. And then you have the bad one. You have the one that finds excuses, that tries to, just search for comfort, just search for what is easy at the moment, but in the long term is not going to give you the results you want. Now, the problem with these voices is that, first of all, the one that wants the good for you, that wants you to improve, to become better in the future, usually it is much more quiet. It's more subtle. It doesn't try to justify anything to you, to find reasons why you should do it. Usually it just tells you should do that. And that's it. Especially if you're not used to listening, if you're used to just doing what is comfortable, what is not good for you, it's going to be even more quiet. It's going to be even more subtle than you would hope it would be. On the other hand, if you're looking at, in this moment of when you have to make a decision, often the voice that just wants comfort, just wants what's pleasurable in the moment, not only tends to be much louder and much more apparent, but also it has more excuses. It has good arguments to give you to follow what it wants you to do. And then again, especially if you're used to accepting these excuses, accepting what it tells you and doing what it wants you to do, it's going to be much more louder. You're barely even going to notice the other one. The critical point you have to keep in mind is that while the negative voice tells you to do what is pleasurable, and it may feel nice, go play the video games, eat the bad foods, procrastinate, do all these things, they feel good in the moment. But the problem is that progress will happen regardless if you want it to or not. Time will pass, things will evolve. And they either evolve up or they evolve down. There's really no, just maintaining staying stable, because let's imagine even if the circumstances remain the same, you're getting older, meaning your chance to fulfill your potential is decreasing by the second it passes. And so even if circumstances remain the same, things are not the same. It's the first thing you have to keep in mind, so that when you do accept the negative voice, when you accept to do what is not right for you, remember that you're not just maintaining, it is pulling you down, even if it's just slightly from this decision. But if you do a lot of them, then it will exponentially curve down. But it is not all bad. Obviously, if you start taking the correct steps and if you start doing good for yourself, no matter how small it is, because if now let's say your life's a mess, nothing's going well for you, you're in bad shape, broke, all is bad, a small step in the right direction can make all the difference. Because one step leads to the next, and do that for 1 year, 2 years, you'll be a completely different person. And another thing to keep in mind, and this really helped me as well, or helps me, especially on days when I'm more tired, where I've worked a lot already, where it's a bit harder to actually go ahead and do what I know I should do, is I think about that by me delaying on this right now, it's one more day or one more week, or how long I'm delaying to the best version of myself. So essentially I'm delaying all the success, all the goals that I want. By delaying on this, I'm just delaying on that. And when you put in that context, it really changes, because when we delay, we think we're just delaying on the activity. We don't think of, okay, where does this activity lead to? By changing this a little bit as well, is going to help you when the moment for action comes to do the right thing. Now, that's all nice and dandy and it sounds good. Okay, I just listen to the good voice, I do the good things, I improve. But I'm sure you already know that. Everyone knows that already, because it's easy to think you're going to do the right thing when you're motivated, when you're comfortable, when you're just in your chair watching this video. Then it's easy. It's easy to be motivated then. But the hard part is when you're tired, when you don't feel like it, when all the chips are not in your favor. What do you do then? Now, before we get into that, I just want to tell you as well one more time that the more good you do, the easier it becomes to do that. The easier it becomes to listen to this voice, to reject the bad one, and essentially to do what is right for yourself. That's just what I wanted to kind of get out of the way and just say that it's not always going to be as hard as it is right now. But the main thing, the first thing I would recommend you to focus on to actually make it easier is to become more aware. Because if you become more aware, not only of the right action, but of yourself, of what you're experiencing, what you're craving, what you're not craving, and to just recognize that you don't need to do anything, you can choose what you want to do, the easier it will become. Now, the main thing I suggest for you to do this, to become more aware, to become more conscious of everything, essentially, is meditation. Now, I'm sure you've heard me talk a lot about this. It serves a lot of purposes, but here it serves a massive one. Now, the meditation I suggest here is, I suggest on a daily basis, 5 to 10 minutes. So you just sit down, close your eyes. So breathe in, breathe out, focus on your breathing, on the present moment, on the thoughts that are happening. Just become aware of everything, understanding you don't need to identify with any of it. Do that, I suggest every day, 5 to 10 minutes. Again, it's a practice that the more you do it, the more you start to notice the benefits. The more you become calmer, more grounded, more present, all good stuff. Now, in a more practical sense of, okay, when these moments appear, let's say right now I had to go to the gym, but I'm tired. I don't feel like it. I'm watching a YouTube video. I want to watch another one. And in my mind, excuses are starting to pop up. I'm starting to think, yeah, maybe I'll just go tomorrow. I'll just go on Saturday as well instead of today. I'll just go harder tomorrow. But we all know that usually doesn't happen. If you skip today, you're likely just not gonna compensate for that. And it likely can start a downward spiral that you won't be able to get out of. Now, in those moments, you can really use meditation as well to, when you notice that, close your eyes and start to notice what is happening in your mind. Observe these excuses, observe these thoughts, these things happening. And the better you get at that, the more you'll be able to distance yourself from it, meaning that you can look at it happening. You can, a good way that I like to do is imagining you're in a movie theater seat, and in the screen in front of you is playing these thoughts, these excuses. When you start doing that, you start noticing that you can look at them, you can observe them, meaning they're not you. They're a part of you, of course, but they're not all of you. So you can choose to act in them or not. So the first step, it's very important, but by itself doesn't mean that you're going to improve. Initially, it's just going to make you feel worse and worse about skipping, and then inevitably it's going to make you act. You don't always want to be feeling horrible about yourself to be able to act, because in the long term that is not sustainable. Once you start seeing some progress, when you start moving up, it's easy to get comfortable. It's easy to not be running away from pain anymore, and then what's going to motivate you? As such, this is not enough. And one of the great steps to actually get you to act, not having to feel super bad, because that's not what we want as well, is to make it as easy as possible to do the habits you want to do. So if it's the gym, a lot of times it's a problem if, let's say, I notice I have to go to the gym now, but my clothes aren't prepared, my shoes aren't prepared, I'm not certain of the workout plan I'm gonna do. The gym I go to and the time I would go to, it's very crowded, I feel nervous there. It's like 30 minutes away and I have to walk there, so it's very overwhelming, it's very tough, it doesn't feel good. But if instead of that, you could, let's say, find a gym that's closer to your home. Let's say 5 minutes distance. Let's imagine it's possible. Maybe it's a bit worse, but it's easier for you to get there. And then you start scheduling it at a time that's almost known. Let's say lunchtime, and you can do that. So when you're there, it's more pleasant. You don't have to wait to use any of the machines. You actually feel good when you're working out. In this scenario, next time that the feeling of I have to go to the gym pops up at the time that you have to go, it's gonna be much easier. Because you're going to be like, oh, okay, and I forgot, if you already prepared your clothes, they're already inside your backpack, you're going to be like, oh, I just have to grab my backpack, walk 5 minutes, it's going to be pleasant, I do my stuff, maybe I chit chat with the workers there, it's calm, it's nice, and then you come back. If that's the vision in your mind, you're going to be much more likely to actually go and do what you have to do. The main thing you have to keep in mind here is remove any of the distractions that are stopping you from going and doing the habit as much as you can, and then make it add to your environment, to your surroundings, things to make it easier to do what you have to do. The more you do this, and I would recommend you read the book Atomic Habits. I'll probably do a video in the future more about this, but that's kind of the very overall view. Remove the distractions and add things that make it easier to do the habits. By doing this, becoming more aware and then making it easy to do what you have to do, you're going to notice yourself not only doing more of what you should do, but doing it faster and enjoying it more, which is really what we want. You don't always want to be in this extremely uphill battle. Every day is a grind because, again, for most people, if you don't enjoy minimally at least what you're doing every day, it's very rare that you'll keep going for, the years to come, which is what you want at the end of the day. Building a business, gym, all these things are things that you want to keep doing, well, pretty much forever until you can't anymore. Now, before you go ahead and do that and implement it, which I hope you do, it's knowledge without practice is useless. But before that, I also want to recommend you do something. And this is something that is going to give you immediate power over yourself. It's really probably the closest thing to a magic pill, but it's not a magic pill because it's very hard to do. Now, next time you're already past that point where you've given up to your excuses, to your temptations. Let's say you're already driving to McDonald's, already in your mind, you're like, okay, I'm gonna get the Big Mac, the McFlurry, all that good stuff. When, let's say in this case, you're driving up, you're pulling up to the drive-thru, in that moment, before you commit really to that action, decide, no, I'm not gonna do it. and the lady asks what's gonna be, and you say, never mind, I forgot my wallet, and you just keep going, you drive off. I say that at McDonald's it can be as well, I don't know, you're about to watch porn and you shouldn't do, and right before you close the thing. Or right as you're about to play video games, skipping the gym, you're like, no, I'm not gonna do this, go to the gym. Do it at least once. Obviously, I'm not asking you to do this all the time, but if you do it once, you realize just how much power you have. You'll be so aware of that space, because when we talk about the space to act, there are many spaces. There's the initial space when you should act, then there's going to be more opportunities. The space is going to be smaller, it's going to be harder to act, but it's still going to be there. Until that last moment when you actually do the wrong thing, you can always change the course of what you're doing. So I urge you, do that once, and then you realize just how much you can do. You'll realize that you don't have to be a slave to your mind, to your impulses, to all these bad things that hinder you. You'll realize that you can be so much more than what you currently are.